The Japanese at the top says, after Benjamin Fulford DVD, says series. The next line reads, truth of the shock is jammed. I don't know what that means. The next Japanese section is a picture and I cannot translate it. February 27th, 2012, Weekly Geopolitical News and Analysis, 2012, February 27th. U.S. Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner arrested, questioned, and released. Asian negotiations continue. Timothy Geithner was detained for questioning by New York police on February 24th and was released after giving evidence about many high-level financial criminals, according to New York police sources. Quote, in most cases we have to slap people to get them to talk, but in this case we had to slap him to shut him up, one of the interrogators joked. Geithner has been released but is accompanied at all times by an armed deputy to make sure he does not leave the country. Former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi of Italy is also proving to be very talkative, sources in Europe say. Berlusconi has been released. Meanwhile, meetings between White Dragon Society representatives and South Korean government officials last week in Seoul were very productive. This is the first report on the ongoing chaos in Europe and the U.S. before returning to the Asian negotiations. In general, what has happened is that dozens of high-level informants have come forth in the past weeks, and detailed testimony by them is being gathered. Apart from Geithner and Berlusconi, the talking big fish include members of the Rothschild family who have come forth with startling information. The most interesting revelation given by the Rothschilds is that Queen Victoria was actually the illegitimate daughter of Nathaniel Rothschild. That means Rothschilds had managed to place family members at the head of British, German, and Russian empires by the time World War I started. Hitler was also a Rothschild who wanted to be crowned king of the world and who helped found Israel by chasing the Jews out of Europe. Their infiltration of the highest levels of world power continued in the post-war period, so in the big picture of things we are witnessing the collapse of the Rothschild attempt to crown themselves as monarchs of a world government with a capital in Jerusalem. The competing attempt by George Bush Sr. and the Nazi faction to set up a 1,000-year Reich is also collapsing. Geithner has already told the police that both he and Obama work for Bush. The Bushes, like Geithner and others, are not allowed to leave the U.S. now. The names of some of the many top Kabbalists being fingered by high-level defectors will be listed at the end of this report. Wow. In other signs of the collapsing old regime, the Greeks have clearly told the EU to put their latest bailout where the sun does not shine. Elected Prime Minister George Papandreou is expected to return to power soon and replace the cabal puppet Lucas Papadopoulos, according to Europe-based CIA sources. The Italians are also deciding they do not want to become part of the greater German Empire and have begun actively preparing a return to the lira, the sources said. The Kabbalists, for their part, are still fighting to preserve their power and control. The latest scam they are working on involves the $6 trillion worth of 1934 gold-backed securities that were seized in Switzerland recently. These bonds were tied to financier Bush Clinton bagman Mark Rich of Glencore Commodities. The plan was to place Hillary Clinton at the head of the World Bank and have her use the World Bank to launder the bonds and give the money to the communist government in China. The Chinese, in return, were supposed to turn a blind eye to the continuing European Central Bank and Federal Reserve Board scams. The Kabbalists have also tried yet again to assassinate Russia's Vladimir Putin in an attempt to regain control of Russia in a desperate attempt to revive the insane plan to get the Russians to help start World War III. They feel is needed to complete their plans for world domination. The Pentagon has already told top Kabbalist attack dog Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel that they would shoot down any Israeli planes that tried to trigger this war by attacking Iran. Hey! The CBS News network in the U.S. has now broken with the Kabbalists and has begun information warfare with Kabbalist propaganda outlets like CNN and Fox. Meanwhile, in Asia, signs of harmony and unity are multiplying. Discussions last week in Korea between White Dragon Society representatives and South Korean representatives reached agreement in principle on many issues. First of all, the South Koreans agreed on unification between North and South Korea based on the principle of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, a ceremonial post, perhaps symbol of unity, and a palace. After North-South unification, talks could begin on greater Eastern Asian economic and political integration. The South Koreans also agreed to the plan to set up a new international economic planning agency in Japan, so long as it was also possible to set up a major new private sector financial center near Busan, South Korea. There was also agreement on the issue of having Asian nations continue to support the transition of the Pentagon into a global peacekeeping force merged with the Russian and Chinese militaries. A Chinese delegation is expected in Japan soon to further develop the ideas explored in South Korea. In Japan, meanwhile, the Yakuza understand their funds in the U.S. were frozen by Bush flunky David S. Cohen. There will be partial retaliation when senior Cabal operative Ishiro Ozawa is arrested on tax evasion and has his funds frozen. There will also be confiscation of Japanese-listed company stocks and other assets in Japan illegally taken over by the Cabal. This confiscation is expected to affect at least 30% of the total value of all listed shares in Japan, as well as considerable amounts of real estate. Similar confiscations of assets illegally obtained by Cabalists are expected to take place around the planet, especially in the USA. Although it is still premature to give a timetable on further arrests, here is a partial non-alphabetical list of people, many of who have tried to keep a low profile, who have been informed upon the recent wave of Cabal defectors. The family of three, the Medicis and Borgias, the Club of Rome, Larry Summers, Paul Volcker, Wiley Aitken, Vernon Jordan, Admiral William Crowe, Richard Haas, Felix Warburg, John Jacob Astor, Lord Pillsbury, Bill Hicks, Kiyohika Nishimura, David Gurgen, Lamar Smith, J. Rockefeller, Yutaro Kobayashi, John Snow, Mark Rich, David Cohen, James Cameron. His family got rich from opium. John Roberts, Paul Wolfowitz, Frank Carlucci, Peter Hans Klovenbach, the former Black Pope, George Bush Sr. And it ends there with a comma and refers you to benjaminfulford.net. Thank you for watching. I'm reading from the Benjamin Fulford webpage. The Japanese at the top says, after Benjamin Fulford DVD, says series. The next line reads, Truth of the Shock is jammed. I don't know what that means. The next Japanese section is a picture and I cannot translate it. February 27, 2012, Weekly Geopolitical News and Analysis, 2012, February 27th. U.S. Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner arrested, questioned, and released. Asian negotiations continue. Timothy Geithner was detained for questioning by New York police on February 24th and was released after giving evidence about many high-level financial criminals, according to New York police sources. Quote, in most cases we have to slap people to get them to talk, but in this case we had to slap him to shut him up, one of the interrogators joked. Geithner has been released but is accompanied at all times by an armed deputy to make sure he does not leave the country. Former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi of Italy is also proving to be